IVM.
Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter, and today we are going to delve deep into biases and blind spots. Okay, now give me some time. I don't usually start the episode with some kind of monologue, but just give me some time here because I need to give you guys a bit of background before I introduce the guest. Okay, so here we go. Now, in 2002, Princeton University psychologist Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work in applying psychological insights to economic theory, particularly in areas of judgment and decision making under uncertainty. If that sounds a little bit too technical for you guys, he cracked a way on how our brain thinks when we make decisions. So back in the 1970s, Kahneman and his collaborator Amos Tversky did massive work, huge work, groundbreaking work in psychology of prediction and probability judgment. If you want to read their original paper, just Google Kahneman and Tversky paper and you'll get a bunch of stuff. My personal favorite, the one I really like, and I suggest you go for that, is their 1974 article on for Science magazine. It was titled Judgment Under Uncertainty, Heuristics and Biases. Heuristics is nothing but shortcuts. So that paper talked about three biases or shortcuts that our mind and our brain make when they make decisions. Shortcut number one, representativeness. Shortcut number two, availability. Shortcut number three, anchoring. And if you want to read more as bonus material, I suggest you read Michael Lewis's book on these two masters, on Kahneman and Tversky. It's called The Undoing Project. Hoping it gets made into a movie someday. Why is all this important? This entire background that I've given. Hear me on, okay? So just give me a bit. So a few months ago, Harsha from this company called Syntoniq reached out to me with this online questionnaire to gauge, to measure, to get an idea of my mental makeup from the perspective of financial planning. Okay, a detailed questionnaire. Took me easily 10 to 15 minutes to crack it. What is the result? It's a financial behavioral personality report that was really detailed. It's called 3B, okay, for biases, behaviors, and blind spots. And then the report, in the end, gives me a risk score, a standard risk score, and a dynamic risk range. Summarize whatever I've told you so far. Here's the thing. Our mental makeup and how we look at risk is really important to our investment decisions. And that's why our financial planning needs to take this into account instead of simply putting everything into an Excel file and plugging all the data in. And that's where our guest today and our topic comes in. To discuss all of this and why it's important to you, listeners, I have with me Prasad Ramani, founder and chief behavioral officer at Syntoniq. Prasad, sorry about that. I just had to give this background. Welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Thank you so much for doing this for us. Go for it. Tell us about yourself and how you got into behavioral finance.
Anupam, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's great to be with you. And I think you did a wonderful job of giving a very, very succinct, very easily understandable introduction to behavioral finance. So my background, as you probably already know and we already discussed, has been in quantitative finance for the last 22 years. And I've basically worked on all kinds of quantitative stuff like portfolio optimization, risk management, modeling, and all these things. Now, the interesting thing about quantitative finance is it tries to remove emotions and biases out of decision making, right? And 5-6 years back, I got into behavioral finance, which is switching from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, where you start taking into account the emotions and the biases and all the behaviors, because I realized that end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of Excel sheets you have. It doesn't matter what kind of mathematical modeling you have, what kind of data you have. If you have a person making a decision, then all kinds of psychological factors are involved. And this is what is extremely key to become a good investor.
Okay, Prasad, fascinating, right? Because so far, whatever I've discussed with a lot of people here on my show for financial planning and the discussions that I have even outside the podcast usually just involve someone coming to me or me talking to someone and him plugging all these numbers into Excel and saying, okay, you're 25 years old, you've got 35 years to work, this is your retirement goal, boom, that's it. And the Excel file gives you everything.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples here, right, to kind of to kind of dig a little deeper into this. Now, when it comes to money management, right, there are two aspects. One, you have the institutional side, which is financial advisors and managers and all those people, right? And then you have the retail side, which is like, the end investors who are people on the street, the lay people or professionals, right?
Yep.
Now, this was about like 6 or 7 years ago, right? So my wife, basically, she was a working professional. She's a very smart woman. She has an MBA and all that stuff, and pretty financially sophisticated too. But what was happening was she would basically take her salary and just put it into her, savings account, and she wouldn't do anything with it, right? And so I was here, like her husband, who's a money manager with a global family office. I was co-managing about $1.4 billion. And I used to keep giving her tips and techniques on what to manage and how to manage and, what portfolios to invest in. And she would never really hear to me. Like she would say that I'll take care of it myself. I don't want to do anything with the money. I just want to keep it safe, right?
Okay.
The funny part was her relationship manager from the bank, who was a financial advisor, would keep calling her, once a month to just tell her, hey, you have all this money sitting in your account doing nothing. Why don't we talk about it? Why don't we do some financial planning? You have X, dollars or X whatever rupees sitting in the account and it's just going waste. Now, she didn't like the way he was approaching the conversation, right? Because from her perspective, she was like, you don't know me. Don't talk about money, at the get-go. I don't like to discuss money with strangers. Who are you? I don't know you. So that's one thing, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing was with me, even though I was telling her to do all this stuff, she was not listening to me. And obviously, like a typical husband and wife, we were like, trying to figure this out. Then one day I realized that, when we were talking about all these different things, and I was doing a lot of research on behavioral finance, and this was about 6 years back when I had not even started Syntoniq, I realized that her father had lost a lot of money in the stock market scam of Harshad Mehta, right? And so her childhood, she went through pretty difficult financial time period when, things were not easy at home. So in her mind, she had gotten anchored to, investing means risk. Risk means stock markets means you end up losing money. So that anchor, and that was a strong psychological anchor because of which she couldn't move out of it.
Yeah.
That was fascinating because when I was doing money management myself, I found that as an institutional manager, we were making a lot of silly mistakes, And when I started looking deeper into it, I found that either we were being overconfident or we were getting stuck to our positions. We were doubling down on our bets. At that time, I didn't realize that, behavioral finance had already done a lot of research on these topics. But once I started reading academic papers, I realized that there are about 140 recognized biases and behaviors in the academic world. 140, which is a lot, right?
That's a lot, yeah.
But like you rightly said, there are some foundational, biases and foundational behaviors like the one that Kahneman proposed and Tversky proposed, and a bunch of other fantastic researchers have proposed. So what I did was I decided to do a lot of research into this, these different topics and identify these foundational factors and try to see how we can help people become aware of them and so get better at financial decision making.
Understood. You've just given me the lead into the next question, right? Let's take this from you and your wife to what you see as a problem beyond that. So I want you to tell us where you see the current problem and what are the reasons behind that. Why is it that way? Whether it's financial planning or the way that the institutional sector looks at the retail sector for money, financial planning, selling products, whether it's investment or it's friends. Let's go into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest problem that nobody is really addressing directly, at least currently, is that investing involves a lot of psychology. There's a lot of behavioral factors that go behind, why people invest the way they invest, why they think the way they think. Yeah. And unfortunately, what's happening is, lay people or investors, they're not really aware of the subconscious factors that go into decision making. And because they themselves don't know what the subconscious factors are, financial planners, financial advisors, money managers are not able to help them properly because they also don't know what's the psychology behind investing. Where are my clients getting stuck? And because the advisors and clients are not on the same page in terms of the psychology, it's easy to make mistakes given the fact that there's a lot of trading apps there. There's a lot of easy ways of investing now. It doesn't mean that investing is easy or investing is simple. Investing is actually a pretty complicated topic and you have to approach it in the right way. And because of of our ignorance of the underlying psychological and behavioral factors, we end up making mistakes which can be very, very costly for us. That's the key problem. And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody's talking. I mean, this is in a way the first time that we are discussing this from a behavioral angle, bias angle, blind spot angle, like you've just like I read in one of the interviews that you had given. So,
yeah,
tell me what's missing, Prasad.
Sure.
What are the 2 or 3 issues that you find are missing out there? I mean, I'm discussing this so that once you answer this and we go into a break on the other side, we'll fill in that gap and tell our listeners how Syntoniq fills that. Tell us.
Absolutely. Look, let's just take a step back, right? Let's figure out what is happening and how our brains make decisions, right? Imagine like 5,000 years ago, right? Our ancestors were, out there hunting in the forest, and they're faced with, like, I don't know, lion or tiger or something, right? Now, if they stop to think about, what's the velocity at which this animal is going to run at me? What's my acceleration got to be? At what projectile should I throw my spear, or what should I do? They would be eaten up, right? So they have to make a very, very, very quick decision, which is fight or flight. Either you fight or you just run away, right? Our brain is actually, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, it is still 5,000 years old, in the sense that it takes a lot of years for the brain to rewire itself, right? So in that sense, even today, our brains are not fit for a world where there is too much of data. I'll give you a simple example. Just answer this. How many, like, for example, shirts and pants and suits do you have? 15, 20, 30, right?
Not that much, but let's just put it at 10.
All right, 10. Okay, excellent. Yeah. And let's count all the other pieces of, accessories, like your belt, your socks, your shoes, your tie and everything. So that's another 10, 15, right? So let's call it 25, 30 overall. And there's another, right? Now, if your brain were to process every single permutation and combination of what you can wear, right, it will take you probably 12 hours to decide what to wear. But our brains are really, really smart. They're very sophisticated, right? They make very quick decisions, right? In 30 seconds, you say, I want to wear this, I want to do this, whatever, right? In fact, if you look at, for example, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, they pretty much wear the same dress every single day, or they used to, because they don't want to spend the time making the decision of what to wear. Now, this is called decision fatigue, right? But anyways, the point is, our brains are fabulous at processing information. Our brains can basically arrive at very quick decisions, right? But there's also a small problem here, and that is, when you provide a lot of financial information to somebody, and when I'm looking at the financial world, I'm looking at the newspaper, I'm looking at the the financial channel news, I'm reading blogs. There is so much of data that my brain cannot process all this stuff properly. So I take shortcuts, right? And these shortcuts are without my own knowledge, without my own awareness. And so a lot of times I see something and I kind of I don't even know why I'm doing this on my portfolio. It just seems very natural and seems very logical to me, but probably I'm getting anchored. Probably I'm seeing patterns where none exist. Probably I'm doubling down on my bets unnecessarily, or when it's not required. So all the psychological factors which are below the layer of our awareness influences our decision making, right? And this is because there are 2-3 concepts. One is something called bounded rationality, which is we are all logical people, but only to a certain extent. And why is that? Because we don't have all the time in the world to analyze every piece of information. Okay, so we have to take quick decisions, and when we take quick decisions, we end up taking shortcuts. And if those shortcuts are something that we are not aware of, then we could end up making mistakes. So it's extremely important to understand what are those factors. For example, like you rightly suggested, representativeness, anchoring. What are those factors that really influences our financial decision making? And once you become aware of those factors, you can get better at making decisions.
Okay, Prasad, I need to ask you one thing, because so far, in this first part of the episode, we've spoken a lot about concepts, and logical stuff. Can you tell me real life examples? How does this manifest? I share with you my stuff also, in the sense that say that if I'm someone who, let's say that if I thought that Reliance's rights issue price at 1,200 was too expensive or looked optically very large, 1,200, that's somehow gone into my...
Correct.
then I will not buy at that point of time. And then I just ignore it. And throughout that, instead of actually looking at the fundamentals, the valuations, my mind is actually getting distracted somewhere else. Okay, so that's one example I can think of for me personally. Just sharing this with you. Second, good lord, aversion, loss aversion. That's a big one for me. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'll let you do the explaining out here. Whether it's your own examples or you've had people come to you or you see in the industry, tell us how this manifests exactly. Make it go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, excellent. So sometimes what ends up happening is, clients come to advisors, right? And they're looking at their portfolios or they're talking about, where to, plan and how to invest and stuff like that. And the client says, my uncle made 15% year on year on this equity markets or whatever, right? So I like to basically, make 15% returns too. And the advisor is fine. Yeah, let's, we can do that, but the volatility is going to be high. And so what's the volatility going to be? It's probably going to be 20% or 21% and stuff like that. Now, when you're talking about numbers like this, right, now volatility of 20, 21% doesn't seem big to a client. They're thinking, if I get 15% return, volatility is 5% more, that's okay. But the biggest problem here is that volatility results in drawdowns, so suddenly the market is down by 30% or, 25, 27%, it's fallen in 7-8 days or something. And suddenly the client is shaken up now. No, I want to stop my investing, get out, this is too much for me, right? So the point is 2-3 things happened here. One, when the client says that my uncle made 15% and I like to make that return, your uncle probably made 15% in a completely different time period. So you got anchored to a different regime, right? Probably now going forward, you probably can't make 15%. You probably can make only 12%, number one. Or your goals are just say 5 or 7 years away, in which means you can't take that much of risk. You need to take a little lower risk, right? So what ends up happening is these are factors that go behind the client's mind, and the advisor is not able to deal with them because the advisor also doesn't know why the client is shifting and how to talk to them about it and how to explain these things to them, right? So for example, there are these huge firms in the US, right? There's a lot of our clients are actually US financial advisors. A lot of these big firms have thousands of advisors, and they also have a separate department called litigation risk department to help advisors fight lawsuits that their clients have filed against them. Why? Because of a misunderstanding of what risk is. For a client, risk means something else. For an advisor, risk means something else. And they're not on the same page. And because of which, the advisor sometimes, again, if the advisor is let's assume they want to push some products, right, without really doing a good job, then they can actually use these psychological factors and push products that are not right for the clients. So in this sense, it's important for clients to realize, why am I talking about 15%? What does 20% volatility mean? What is this particular, why am I changing my risk preferences? When the markets go down by 20%, why am I feeling shocked? So these are all actually psychological factors, and these are important things to be discussed.
From my perspective, loss aversion, like I was telling you, is big, and that's the thing that comes up a lot in conversation with friends also, Prasad, and especially now in this pandemic in the last 6 months. That here's the thing, the horror or the fear or the, call it whatever you want, the negative emotion that comes from losing, say, 100 rupees is far higher than the satisfaction I have if I've gained 100 rupees. And to my mind, that is probably one of the funniest damn things that the brain does there. I mean,
exactly, Anupam. You're so spot on, and that is actually one of the key findings from prospect theory.
I mean, I would go to crazy lengths to avoid losing money without even getting to think how much I would gain if I take a certain decision. I mean, that it's there in so many. I mean, insurance is built around that, man. I mean, the entire of insurance is built around that. So, folks, that's it on this first part of this really special episode of Paisa Vaisa. On the other side, when we come back, we're going to talk to you about solutions. We're going to talk to you about what Syntoniq does, how they resolve the problem. We're going to talk about the report that these guys did on me. Massive report that was. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel. So Jasleen Royal came on Storytellers and Storytellers this week with Vineet. It was a really interesting conversation. Do definitely check that out. Hamsini Hariharan is back on the Pragati podcast after an extended absence. Hamsini was one of the original hosts along with Pravan, but she was unable to continue. But we're glad to have her back. She's talking about her experiences since she left. She's been studying in China. Definitely check that out. You'll enjoy that. On Pulya Bazi, they discussed the revolution of 1857 as seen from contemporary eyes. Definitely give that a shout. I think you'll love that as well. Abhijit Ganguly was on Cyrus Says a couple of weeks ago, and he had such a great time, and we were so happy to have him on that we asked him to join us for Cocked and Bull, and he was on this week. Do check that out. And lastly, I'd like to mention our Tamil show. We've been doing a show called Kadai Podcast Ponniyin Selvan, hosted by Kavita Jiva. She has been phenomenal. She's rewritten the stories in a way which really, they speak to a modern audience. But Ponniyin Selvan is over, and she has started a new story, though. The new story that she started is Sivakamiyan Sabatham. I'm sure I mangled that pronunciation, and I'm sure you'll love it if you're a Tamil speaker. Do definitely check it out. And with that, let's get you onto your show.
And welcome back to this really special episode of Paisa Vaisa, where we're talking about biases, blind spots, heuristics, shortcuts, and all the kind of behavioral stuff the brain does when it is taking decisions in general, and also for us, decisions in personal finance and in investing. In the first half, we spoke about all the different kind of stuff that's out there: loss aversion, prospect theory, representative anchoring, whatnot out there. And like I said, if you want to know more, it's a fascinating topic. You should read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Prasad, now tell us about Syntoniq. Okay, so what do you guys really do? Go for it.
Great. So in 2017, I founded Syntoniq because what I found was while there's all this wonderful academic research, nobody was building products or nobody was building models that could actually help with financial planning. And so I founded Syntoniq in 2017. I put together a team of behavioral economists. So I have a team of PhDs in social psychology, neuroeconomics, and behavioral economics. And we basically put together models that financial advisors can use, insurance agents, insurance managers can use, wealth tech firms can use. And the whole idea is to enable the financial services professional, whether that's a planner or an advisor and a client, to kind of understand each other and also build behaviorally suitable portfolios. So that's what we do.
Tell me,
yeah,
how do you resolve the problem? What is the product and who is it meant for? I'll give you some background, okay? When Harsha from Syntoniq contacted me and sent me this link to make my own 3B report. Now, I'll actually let Prasad talk about it. Prasad, just go.
Sure.
This is how this report is broken down. I'll probably add some of my view as a user of that report.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Yeah. First of all, I'll just give you a simple example, right, to kind of give your listeners an idea as to why this is required. Now, in each of us, right, there's actually two personalities really. There's a thinker personality and a doer personality. So, for example, typically when it comes to end of December, we are looking forward to a new year, right? And then we make up all these resolutions. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, right? And think of this example. You say that, okay, next morning I'll wake up at 5 in the morning. I'll go for a jog. I'll go to the gym. Of course, not now because of Corona. But anyways, so now what happens is when you wake up the next day at 5 in the morning and your alarm goes off, what do? You snooze it and you say, you know what, let me just sleep in today. I'll probably go to the gym from tomorrow onwards, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's an experience all of us have. Now, why is that? Because the one who made the decision about tomorrow or next week is the thinker personality. And the thinker personality is very smart, very logical, very rational. The doer personality is the one that has to do that stuff at that particular moment in time, right? But the doer personality gets bored, it gets dejected. It's I don't want to do this right now. I want to just enjoy. And so there's a gap between the thinker and the doer, which is why you don't end up following up on your decisions, on your good decisions that you've made, right? So that's one example, okay? Now, the second example is, let's assume that you're kind of dieting, right? And then I ask you in the morning at say 9 in the morning, hey, Anupam, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I'll give you a snack. Will you have an apple or a samosa? You'll probably say, I'll have an apple because that's healthy, right?
Yeah.
But at 4 o'clock, when I bring those two in front of you, you will actually probably pick the samosa, right? And right. So this is something called stated preference and revealed preference. So stated preference is what you say you will do, and revealed preference is what you actually do. Okay. Now, if you look at a lot of risk tolerance questions, right, or risk tolerance assessments that financial advisors give, they all measure stated preference. What will you do if the markets fall by 25%? What will you do if you get, like, say, additional 10 lakh rupees as bonus? What will you do with this? What will you do? So it's all asking you something in the future today when you are like, calm and cool and collected and everything is fine, right? And so you will say, if the markets falls by 25% and if the valuations are good, I'll put in more money. That's the right answer. But when it actually happens, you probably won't do that. You're very stressed out, right?
Yeah.
So what we did was we said, okay, let's build a questionnaire that not only just looks at stated preferences, which is like, what will you do with this? What will you do with that? But will also understand your revealed preferences. Revealed preference is what you actually do when things happen. And so we then figured out of these 140 biases, what were those 5 or 6 or 7 key biases and behaviors that can help us understand your revealed preference. And so almost like, even before you do that, we know that you'll probably do that. And so that's how the My3B assessment was built. And bear in mind, My3B is just one thing that we do. We have like actually a bunch of other products that we also do that look at like deep client engagement, behavioral portfolio management, and a bunch of other things, right? So that's how it's built. It's to basically make sure that the advisor and the client understand what these behavioral aspects and the psychological factors are, when it comes to financial decision making, and how to discuss that about those important factors today when everything is good and clear, rather than do it when the markets are going crazy.
Fantastic. Walk us through the sections, okay? Because there is biases, behavior, and blind spots, and then there is a risk score. So
fantastic.
Tell our listeners about each, the biases, the behaviors, the blind spots, and the risk score.
Excellent. Okay. So biases, we came up with biases, behaviors, and blind spots because that is how we make decisions. Biases are our subconscious factors that influences our thinking. So we identified 3 key biases: overconfidence, representativeness, and anchoring. These are 3 key biases that are below the layer of our conscious awareness that makes us think in a particular way. Okay. Now, the next layer after subconscious comes the conscious mind, right? So in the conscious mind, there are 2 key factors that enable us to make some choices. One is loss aversion, and the other is to make sure that what our future orientation is. And I'll give you an example.
Sure.
So future orientation is a very, very interesting factor, which I'm sure you have read from Kahneman too. The funny fact is, the Anupam of 5 years from now is a stranger to Anupam as much as I am. Okay, so just think about this for a second. So your future self, Anupam, is a stranger to you as much as I am, which means, let's assume for a sec, right, that if you eat today samosas and pastries and I get fat, not you, then would you do it? You're a nice guy, you probably won't, but I will do it. So if I eat samosas and pastries and Anupam gets fat, I will probably say, you know what, chalega yaar. I mean, Anupam is in pretty good shape, so it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Now, that is what we do with ourselves. We make poor decisions today because the Prasad of 5 years from now is a stranger to me. I don't know him, right? And this is called future orientation. Different people have different connectedness to their future selves. The more connected you are, the better decisions you take because you're worried about your future. The less connected you are, then you are very present focused. You just make decisions for today. So we measure these 2 things. Loss aversion, like you rightly said, which is the 100 rupees losing is more painful than 100 rupees gain, and future orientation. These 2 are critical factors when it comes to how you make financial decisions, right?
Okay.
And the third one is blind spots. Blind spots are things that we don't know, right? So for example, there are 2 things that we call, one is situational belief and one is financial mastery. So situational belief is where you have a very rosy view of your financial future. You think everything is going to be fine in the future, but that's probably not the right thing, given your circumstances today. And then financial mastery obviously is a very simple fact, which is like, do you understand all the intricacies of finance? So these are 7 important factors, right? And now what we do is we measure the 7 factors and then we plug it into your risk score. So what we do is we come up with 2 scores. One is called a standard risk score, which most financial assessment would measure, but we have something called a dynamic range around it. Okay, I'll give you an example here. Let's assume that your standard risk score is 70 and mine is 72. Okay. Most financial advisory firms will build us the same portfolio because it's the same score, correct? But let us assume that my dynamic risk range is 50 to 70 and yours is 70 to 90. So what it means is, for whatever reason, today you are at the lower end of your risk range and I'm at the highest end of my risk range. So in the future, I might actually reduce my risk while you might increase your risk. So we both need to have different portfolios. So our portfolios have to take care of our behavioral attitudes also. And once the financial advisor, once they have this information, right, then they can talk to the client and then say, you know what, while your risk score is 70, your range is 70 to 90. So let's look at your goals and then figure out what's the right risk that your portfolio should have and build those portfolios accordingly. And so these are important conversations, and this is what the My 3B does.
Okay. What kind of questions are there? I remember taking this a while ago. So can you give, just for the sake of curiosity for our listeners, what are the kind of questions that lead you to come up with these conclusions?
Yeah, great question. Now, a couple of things I'd like to mention here first. One is we use a lot of like gamified questions, right? So for example, we ask you stuff like, if you had a choice to like either take $500 as a payment right now, or take a bet where there's a 50% chance of winning $1,200 and a 50% chance of winning nothing, what would you do? So some people would say, I'll take 500 now. Somebody will say, no, I'll take that 50% chance because I can get a lot more money, right? So those are some types of questions where we try to understand, what is your attitude towards money and time and probabilities, and we kind of build on that. Then what we also do is we want to understand, how you think in terms of, for example, anchoring, and this is something that you don't even know. These are all subconscious things. So we kind of ask you stuff like, let's assume that there's a country called, there's a city called Montevideo. How many like children are born in Montevideo every single day? Is it more than 680 or less than 680, for example? Now, you have obviously no idea what that city is and how many children are being born there. You can't even Google it. You don't even have that information, right? But we want to see how far away from 680 your mind comes up with a number, your brain comes up with a number. Is it, some people come up with like 1,500, some people come up with 25, some people say 700. Why? Because 700 is close to 680. That's a number that they have seen. So we try to figure all this like different. So our questions are very gamified, but these are all backed by science. There is so much of research behind these questions. We go through like an intense process of principal component analysis, factor analysis to figure out like what kind of questions to ask, what do they measure, do they measure the right things or not? And so there's an intense research process behind this simple, fun questions.
Fantastic. So finally, Prasad, wrapping this up, so I'm trying to understand what kind of clients do you have? So who's your where do your clients come from? Because the traditional risk planners, financial advisors, or whoever it is, they come to me or when they read of them in the newspapers, they follow the very standard, probably a 60-40 scheme, 60% debt, equity, or that 1 minus age equation. So they are all very simple rules. Consider that your product goes way beyond that. Who are you selling to? Who are your clients? Just give us a sense of that. And can our listeners also actually take this test and figure out for themselves how it works?
Well, this is right now. This is an advisor-led solution. So mostly, they have to contact their financial advisors, and then we provide the access to them. But what we can also do is, if they get in touch with me directly, then probably I can send them the assessment, by myself. So they can get in touch with me at prasad.ramani@syntoniq.com. I can then shoot out an assessment for them. So to answer your question, right, about who we target and who are our clients, we have a lot of clients in the US and Canada and the UK, right? That's our main area. And then we have started to like grow clients and, a following actually in India in the last like 5-6 months since Harsha has come on board.
Yeah.
We basically work with, financial advisory firms, wealth tech firms, financial planning, insurance planning services. Wherever there's a financial professional involved or a financial app involved that serves an end client, we can help. Now, you're absolutely right when you talk about what type of financial advisor or what type of financial app or what type of financial service, take us in and use us, right?
Mm.
Only those advisors or those firms that are looking for market differentiation, that are a little bit ahead in terms of thought leadership, that really want to like serve their clients really well. Those are the type of firms that come to us. To be very honest with you, if you look at like say 100 financial advisors in out there, probably 75 may not be very interested in us. I'll be very honest with you. Only 25 would be very interested because those 25 are forward thinkers. They are people who really want to serve their clients well. They really want to do the right thing. And they want to take that extra step. They want to go that extra mile. And they want to really differentiate themselves, and they're offering from everybody else. So those are the kind of people who come to us. And we've had phenomenal success.
That's what I'm going to end this show on, this question, that since you mentioned that, exactly on that, can you tell our listeners who actually reach out to financial planners, financial advisors, what are the kind of questions they should be asking these guys?
Okay, this is fantastic.
Yeah, to bring an element of what you're saying into their conversations, that can probably help them. See, because when you have an app with you, you can't ask that app to tell me what my bias is. But if you are someone who's listening to this show and says, okay, let me just go out and get a financial advisor, what are the questions that you think he should be asking?
That's a brilliant question, Anupam. Thank you so much for asking that. Sure. A lot of like obviously investors and clients, end up asking, stuff around the fees and, what they charge and all, which is very important because the advisors have to be transparent and everything. But the most important thing to ask your advisors is, how do you make your decisions? Okay, how do you like build portfolios? And I know and I've heard that there's a lot of like psychological factors and behavioral factors that can screw up my decision making process. How can I be sure that you as an advisor are not susceptible to those factors? How are you making sure that you see what I mean?
Yeah.
That is number one. That is very important. Number two, they also have to ask their advisors, how can you help me become a better financial decision maker? What is the value add that you bring to the table? Okay, why do I have to work with you rather than work with an app? What is that extra element that you bring to me? Right. Number two. Number three, they have to ask them, how do you look at risk? Because if I look at risk differently from how you look at risk, then we are going to have a problem. How do we make sure that we look at risk and we are on the same page when it comes to risk, and we are sure that we both agree on certain aspects for the portfolios that you're going to build for me? So these are the kind of questions they should ask, because this is what will lead to a long-term engagement. And this way, if your financial advisor is really willing to spend that time with you rather than just take your money and then try to get some fees off you.
Fantastic. Prasad, where can our listeners reach out to you? Because, I'm guessing that a lot of there might be a chance that some listeners after this episode, they would say that this is a lot of fundas and a lot of heavy stuff. But I think this is critical, guys. You guys need to understand these concepts before you really implement them and see them in action. They'll actually help you take better financial decisions. Prasad, where can our listeners reach out to you? Or maybe on social media?
LinkedIn? Yeah. So, Anupam, I think you made a fantastic point. So I'll just take 1 minute to answer that, which is, all this sounds very complicated. All this sounds very advanced and very kind of like, bit, over the head and stuff, which is why we came up with our behavioral models, which will simplify all these things. I just want to ask you very quickly, Anupam, when you took the My3B assessment, did you feel it was very complicated?
I didn't think it was complicated. I thought it was a whole lot of fun here.
Yeah, exactly, right? So what we do is we have taken a very complicated topic and we have tried to make it fun and accessible and actionable, right? So that's what we do. Your listeners can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. So they just have to look for Prasad Ramani, Syntoniq, Syntoniq. They can also email me at prasad.ramani@syntoniq.com. And any, financial advisory firms, asset management firms, insurance apps, whatever, they can go to our website, www.syntoniq.com, and then just fill up the contact us page, and then we'll reach out to you. So all these different places you can get in touch with me.
Go for it, guys. You know how to contact Prasad, and now you know about the product, so go for it. It's a very different perspective, a very interesting perspective on financial planning. I'm sure you will find this really interesting. So folks, that is a wrap on this episode. I don't want to call it the biases and blind spot special, I guess. Yeah, maybe I'll go with biases and blind spot special with Syntoniq, my guest, Prasad Ramani, founder and Chief Behavioral Officer at Syntoniq. Prasad, thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Anupam, thank you so much again for having me. I really hope your listeners found this useful, and it's been such a delight talking to you. I look forward to meeting you again.
Sure. Same here. Listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. You want to reach out to me, I'm P50 on Twitter. And thank you for listening to Paisa Vaisa.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.
How aware do you think you are of your laws and rights? Do you look up to laws when you are caught up in situations? Do you know what your rights are when you're stuck somewhere bad? Well, here's a show that can help you move an inch closer to being aware of what your rights are. Tune into Know Your Qanoon with me, Amber Rana. This is a podcast meant to answer all your law-related queries. Catch Know Your Qanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.